So, where are you? So, we already had a little bit of that already. I've seen most of you. Thank you, Letitia, for taking the charge on that. We've got two from Brazil, I know that. Boston, Texas, San Fran, Maryland, a couple from New York, Texas, Florida. All right. Kind of on both ends of the both ends of the country. And then there's Texas. That's good, right in the middle. So you level us out. Monica from the Middle East. Where are you from in the Middle East? From China, but in Boston. Great. Saudi Arabia. It's good. I'm tutoring a couple of Saudi Arabian students in college, Monica. It's great. So I thought we'd start off with, some of you are probably familiar with this. Tom asked this last week. So if you were here last week, uh, hopefully maybe you can, maybe your answer will have changed after some practice, after hearing Tom. What is your passages experience? All right, by passages, I hope you all know what I mean. Those are the lengthy or sometimes short passages followed by a series of questions regarding the passages, sometimes called reading comprehension. It's very rare that we have an A. Uh, I am passages, I bleed tone. I have met very few people for whom passages are a particularly pleasant experience. And it looks like most of you are in the C, D, or E category, which means that you either want to improve or you're just at a place where you're not comfortable at all. And you just want to get through these passages, hopefully learn some strategies to get through them effectively. And that's sort of where we are. That's why we're here tonight. So let's get started. All right. This is Testive Study Hall SAT reading passages. This is part 1 of 2. So next week we will finish up with passages going through the last 3 of the 6 different types of questions. I'm John LaPlante. I am the Director of Learning at Testive. I am a former high school and college teacher. I taught at international schools for 7 years, and then have taught at a couple of law schools. And I was a lawyer. I am a recovering lawyer, but still very fond of the law. But have decided to turn my sights to the world of SAT prep. All right, so passages. Just a little review. Passages count for 72% of all of the reading questions, so a significant amount, quite a bit more than the vocab. They are the second most difficult question type to improve upon. I'll just beat you all to it. The first most difficult type, in our opinion, is the vocab. However, following close behind are the passages. How do you get better at passages? Well, a couple of just general points. Again, this is a bit of a review from last week, so bear with me if you've already heard this. Best way of getting better at passages review is to take notes as you read, all right? That doesn't mean taking extensive notes. If you recall, if you were on last week, that means brief notes, but at least one note for every paragraph, okay? So taking notes as you read. Understanding the question types, and that's where we're drilling in today. All right, what types of questions? The College Board only asks 6 different types of questions in the passages component of the test. Knowing and understanding what those question types are gives you a great advantage when answering these types of questions. Understanding the purpose of each paragraph, all right? So in addition to understanding what the passage means as a whole, it's critical that you understand what each paragraph means, okay? So if there's a 4-paragraph passage, you should know individually, okay, why are each of these paragraphs there? What is the author's purpose for writing each of those paragraphs? Process review. All right, so what is the process for approaching passages? Your goal is to optimize your speed and your comprehension. All right. Now, this is a balancing act. All right. because you don't want to go too quickly where you don't understand, and you don't want to go too slowly trying to understand everything because that'll slow you down and hurt you in the end. So the goal here is to find some sort of balance where you're working through the passages quickly, but you're understanding as much as possible. And if you were on last week, you remember Tom talked about one way to do that is to read with your hands, right? To scan the passages, all right? To read quickly, but and reading with your finger especially does help you understand more. It's important to read the whole passage first, all right? There is a sort of a common misconception that reading the questions first might help. Our experience is that doesn't really work. Instead, it just usually slows students down and confuses them because, you're reading twice, so that's not necessary. It's also important to read. It says there including the italics. If you're not familiar with the way that the passages work. Each passage has italics on the top. That is not part of the passage. Instead, that's something that the College Board puts in there to give the reader a brief summary of what the passage is about. It's important to read those, especially for one of the question types that we'll be going over tonight, the main idea types of questions. Take notes while you read. We talked about that already. Answer the questions on one passage at a time. Now this is, in particular where you have those two passages side by side, paired passages they're called. So read passage 1, then go to the questions. Look for any question that asks specifically about passage 1 and answer that question. Then do the same thing for passage 2. Answer only questions that deal with only passage 2. Then you can go back, and some of the questions are going to be comparing questions. They're going to be using both passages. You should do those last, okay? Identify the question type before answering. We're going to be going over that tonight and talking about the importance of 3 of those different types of questions. And finally, apply the appropriate question strategy. So once you've identified what type of question it is, you can apply a strategy for that, and hopefully tonight you'll take away 3 strategies for 3 different types of questions. All right, types of questions. As Tom broke out last week, there are 6 different types of questions. Main idea questions, what we call specific questions, vocabulary questions, hide and seek questions, attitude questions, and technique questions. Tonight we're going to be talking about main idea, specific, and vocabulary questions, the first 3 listed up on top there. All right, main idea questions. These are very common. Typically, every passage will have an accompanying main idea question. They may not use the same language, but typically they'll start with something the passage is primarily concerned with, or the primary purpose of this passage is to, or the primary purpose of the last paragraph is to. So they can ask about the passage as a whole, or the purpose of a single paragraph. That's a little less common. Typically, they ask more about the entire passage. However, they can ask about just a paragraph. It's a little less frequent for them to ask what is the main idea of this passage. That's a little too direct. Instead, when you see these words, they should be a trigger. Aha, this is a main idea question. All right. So you get a main idea question. What do you do? All right. First thing, don't reread the passage. All right. This is the whole point of taking notes. If you have to go back and reread the passage to figure out what the main idea is, that means that you haven't been reading closely enough. So for those of you who have been practicing these, if you find yourself the time to realize if you're not reading, this is a good way of testing whether you're reading closely enough to begin with. If you find yourself for these main idea questions going back and rereading the entire passage, something's wrong, all right? That means that you probably need to slow down, you probably need to take better notes, and you probably need to really, work on that comprehension. That means, with every paragraph stopping, thinking, okay, what did I just read? What was that about? And how does that fit in with the author's main idea? Important thing to know about these main idea questions. Something can be true, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's correct. And in fact, the College Board sets it up so that oftentimes there'll be these trap answers, these red herrings that look appealing, but they often include, because they include something, a true statement, either something that is indeed said within the passage or that's true about the passage as a whole, but that's not the purpose of the passage. Okay, so for instance, you could have a passage about roller coasters at an amusement park that are being rebuilt, and that they will have an answer that will say uh, roller coasters are being rebuilt across the country, and that could be true according to the passage, but that's not really what the purpose of the passage is about. Instead, the passage might be intended to talk to you about how there is a certain level of nostalgia for the past, and people are turning to old forms of entertainment in order to recreate the past. That was the purpose of the passage, not just to state a fact. So oftentimes, look for questions that aren't necessarily factual, but rather about the purpose instead. And this is particularly important when we're talking about entire passages. Um, they have to address the entire passage. Okay, when you get a question that says, "What is the primary purpose of this passage is?" and one of the answers is again, this is true, but it's only about one paragraph within the passage. That is not the correct answer. In order for the best answer is always the one that addresses the entire passage as a whole. Answer types can be far too narrow, or in some respects, they can also be too broad. All right. If there's something that is, you might think that the passage touches upon, but it's not specifically in the passage, that answer is also wrong because it's too broad. So look for answers that, again, encompass the entire passage, but are neither too narrow nor too broad. Um, and one particular thing that the SAT really likes to do is they like to, one of the answer choices they'll give you is something that just sort of summarizes the last paragraph because they know that's the last thing that you've read. They know it's on your mind and they think you're going to seize upon it. And about 20% of the students do that. And so, that's what gives them the nice bell curve that they want. Moving on to the specific type questions. Now, by specific, what we mean here are questions that ask about specific lines within a passage. All right, specific could be anywhere between one sentence to about 3 to 4 sentences at the most. Sometimes they can run a little bit longer, but again, these are just specific portions of a paragraph. Sometimes it could be an entire paragraph, but they're asking instead not what the purpose of it is, but specific questions about the content of that paragraph. So for instance, in lines 42 through 50, and then they provide a little in the parentheses there, those are the first two words, and then the last word. There is a shift in feeling from, and then some answer choices. Or the observations in lines 7 through 10, historically, dot, 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 to ways, establish a contrast between a woman's. And finally, the list in lines 8 through 11, he anxiously, dot, 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 ever, suggests that Mr. Simpson is primarily motivated by. Those are some examples of specific questions. Again, I'm sure if you've been doing any passage practice work, you're probably familiar with them. Just pulling out a couple of lines and asking specifically what they mean and how they relate to the rest of the paragraph or the passage as a whole. And what I just said really goes to the heart of the strategies for the specific questions. Unlike the main purpose, the main idea questions, it's important that you reread, you go back and you actually reread the full sentence, and the one full sentence before and one full sentence after the actual lines that they are asking you to focus upon. Okay? It's not enough just to read that little bit. You have to read before and after because that provides what's most essential, which is the context. In these specific questions, the context of that portion of text is everything. And what do I mean by context? I mean, how does it fit in with the rest? How does it contribute to a larger meaning? It's not enough to just simply read the sentence and then they're not asking you what that sentence means. Instead, they're asking you, what does that sentence mean within the context of everything else that surrounds it? And oftentimes there'll be an answer, which is a trap, that makes sense with the quoted phrase. So it could just basically summarize the quoted phrase, or it could even have a piece of the quoted phrase, but it doesn't take the context into consideration. And that makes it incorrect. So be careful of those. And in particular, be careful of any answer choice that actually quotes the phrase. Those will never be correct. If there's an answer choice and it has, if it's a sentence and it has a word for word, they've just copied the sentence into one of the answer choices, that's not going to be correct. The SAT they don't operate that way. Now, a lot of what I've just said about specific questions carries over to the vocabulary questions. Uh, those focus on one word or perhaps a 2 or 3 word phrase. And examples of that would be in line 12. The author implies that being, and in quotes, again, you look for the word in quotes, human includes, or the message, line 6, is best characterized as, or in context, shadowy, line 41, primarily serves to suggest something, and again, several answer choices. Now, like specific questions, the key here is context. It's not enough. You might see a word that, of course, you know what that word means, but remember, context with these vocabulary questions is critical. Take, for example, a word like fair. All right, they could give you a word such as fair and ask you in the passage, in this line, in line 17, the word fair best refers to, and then give you 6 different answers. Now, think about it. Fair can mean a lot of things. Fair can mean pleasant. Fair can mean, it can be used for weather. It can mean equal or just. So you have to think about it. How does it fit into the sentence as a whole? The test doesn't care about the definition of the word. That's not what they're looking for. They're looking for, how do you understand how this word is being used within the paragraph? And it's almost never being used in sort of your gut instinct. You might think, oh, I know what that word means. And they might give you that as an answer choice, but that's probably not going to be the answer that they're looking for. So what you need to do is, again, reread, all right? Go back, find the word, and then find the sentence before the sentence where that word appears, and then the sentence afterward, and read both of those sentences. Look for the trap, all right? We already talked about this. There will often be a trap answer that's close to the definition of the word, but ignores the word's context, okay? So, you could have a word like, stormy, and it could say very very rough or something like that, but that's not what it means within the context of the paragraph. It could be describing something completely different, so you need to think about it in terms of context. All right, so that's it. Very quickly, that's where the main idea, the specific, and the vocabulary questions. We're going to take it now and see how you do with these. Here's a passage. I want you to take 2 minutes with this. This is a passage, the same passage that was used last week, that Tom had you look at last week and take notes on. So it's going to be familiar to you. And Lucinda, we are going to go over the other question types. Those are next week, however. It would just take too long for us to get through all 6 question types. So next week we are going to be covering the other question types. So why don't you take 2 minutes right now, read this paragraph. That's about how much time you should be, this passage. That's about how much time you should be spending on a passage of this length, anywhere from 2 to 3 minutes. Again, because there could be 2 or 3 passages of this length on the test. You want to time yourself. So don't Obviously, you'll see the blue and the red text at the bottom that does have some significance, but don't focus too much on it right now. I'll go over the question types again just at the end for you. All right, so about 30 more seconds of reading. All right, just curious, any reactions to this passage? Any thoughts? Does anyone, any commentary on the passage itself? It's a very typical SAT reading passage. Um, Pretty general in terms of, they try to find pieces of writing that aren't too familiar. Um, some of you are a little concerned about your speed. Again, that's just a matter of practice. Don't feel, you know, read at a comfortable pace for yourself. Don't feel as though, oh, he said 2 minutes, I have to read it in 2 minutes. If that's not comfortable for you, you know, be aware that you might want to pick up speed, but it's important that you understand. I have a really bad attention span for reading. That's a problem. I mean, and that unfortunately, the SAT they sort of deliberately choose passages that uh, present problems for readers who have a tough time keeping their attention span up. I used to choose passages way back when I was in college. I used to try to write passages for the SAT, and sometimes they would discourage passages that they said were too interesting. So hopefully most of you have gotten through it. If not, uh, we're just gonna plow ahead. This is a real passage from. It's in the Blue Book. It's test one in the Blue Book, section two, question 10. This is a main idea question. The primary purpose of this passage is to don't put your answers down. Just everyone take their time, read read the answers, and then I'll have you um, write. All right, so the primary purpose of the passage is to. All right, what are your answers? What do you think? We've got A, C, E, D, A, C, A. Wow, we're all over the place. We're scattered here. D, 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 E, A, B, D. Looks like maybe D by a slim margin. So let's break these down. Let's take a look. All right, the primary purpose of the passage, again, thinking about this passage as a whole. Answer A, show the impact Black Americans have had on African society. Going back to the passage, uh, This is an example again of where you have to think about the passage as a whole. And while that answer may be true, it's not correct in terms of you thinking about again the whole idea of the passage. Is that really what the author is trying to write about? Is it showing about how Black Americans have had an impact on African societies? While that might be alluded to, or while that might be a part of what the author is explaining, that's not really the primary purpose. All right, so that one we can eliminate. Discuss Africans' efforts to embrace American culture. B is basically sort of in some ways a flip of A, right? So A is saying that it's kind of the perspective of Black Americans on African culture, and B is just simply taking that same answer and more or less kind of flipping it and talking about Black Africans' responses and how they're trying to embrace American culture. Again, a bit too narrow. C, point out the ambivalent feelings one community has for another. Now, here's a kind of tricky one, right? I mean, maybe you don't know what the word ambivalent means, so you're not sure. And it talks about one community and its feeling towards another. That sort of seems like maybe that's what the passage is about. So, you could maybe I don't know. You could save that one. Um, but again, if you know what the word ambivalent means, and that sort of if you're ambivalent towards something, you you don't really have any strong feelings one way or another, right? Um, ambi means both. That's a good vocabulary root if you're studying your vocabulary roots, right? Ambi means both, so that means you feel both kind of. You're sort of neutral. And here, the passage really isn't trying to emphasize that, right? It's not. It's actually the opposite. It's trying to show some strong feelings. So if you did know what the word ambivalent means, you could eliminate C, and that is not the correct answer either. So that leaves just D and E. And D emphasizes the significance of an ongoing relationship. Sort of sounds like what I just said. But, all right, so we'll hold D. And now we'll look at E. Examine the cultural ties between two nations. Now, this is a tricky one um, because, yeah, that seems to be true. But think about the passage and think about one word within this answer: cultural ties, right? Is there really a lot about cultural ties in this passage? Um, it's more about the relationship between the two nations, between Africa and the United States, rather than the cultural ties between the two. You don't see things about culture, for instance, that they share, and there aren't specific examples of certain cultural attributes that the two share. Instead, it's more about the relationship. So the correct answer is D. All right. Let's try a specific example. And again, just let's take a look at these and read it to yourself. I'll give you about 30 seconds to read it and think read through the answer choices in lines 42 through 50. And again, you're going to have to go back and take a look. 42 through 50. That's this passage. That's these lines right here. We wondered if we hadn't been mistaken, if the kinship we could feel, more than describe, was really there, if the roots that had once bound us together had not already withered and died. But time and time again, we were reminded of what we shared. Africa has left her mark on all of us, and when we have reached out to one another through literature, politics, music, and religion, whenever we've made contact, the world has been forced to take note. So that's the specific piece that they're asking about, right? Almost the full body of that paragraph. So this is a long example for a specific type question. Again, they're not typically this long, all right? But what you want to look at is look at the movement within those lines, all right? There's a switch, all right? There's a tone, there's something goes on here. There's almost like an about face and things move. So with that in mind, think about there's this shift, just like they talked about, a shift in feeling. And what is the shift in feeling? Is it going from fear to courage, anger to forgiveness, uncertainty to despair, regret to determination, or doubt to pride? All right. Looks like we've got a lot of E's. So I think here the consensus is E, and that is the right answer. Uh, E is the right. I think taking a look at that closely, that one's fairly clear. All right, and I think you can eliminate some of these answer choices right off. Right, fear. Nothing in this passage suggests fear, so you can strike that one right away just by looking at that first word. I didn't see any fear at all. Anger, again, not much anger in this paragraph at all. So, it's okay to when you're reading through these quickly, and again, you're moving with speed. It's all right to mark the passages in the book, to mark the answers in the book. I mean, you to be an effective test taker, you've got to be writing in the book, and it's okay because if you're writing in pencil, you can go back and maybe you mark something with an X. The key is don't ever do this. Don't ever scratch something out. Then you can't read it because then you realize, uh-oh, what did I just do? Um, Instead, just put a little X through the A or a line through it, and that way maybe you'll have to go back to it. But your gut instinct, you read that word fear, no, that can't be right. You move on. Uncertainty to despair. To despair. Now, in this reading this answer choice, uncertainty, sure, it starts out with a little level of uncertainty, but it's here the word despair. That's where answer C fails because it doesn't end in despair, right? In fact, it's just the opposite. Regret to determination, again, not really any feelings of regret. Um, that you could maybe read that in, but then at the end, this determination, possibly, but it would be a stretch. But then you get to E, and that's just spot on, right? Doubt to pride. So you all got it right. Bravo. Let's see if you can recreate that with this vocabulary example. Here you're looking at one word in the context shadowy. Line 41 primarily serves to suggest something. So let's go back. And it's this word in blue here. So what we want to do, look at that line before, the line after. When we finally met in Africa and America, we were sometimes disappointed. Shadowy imaginings do not usually hold up in the light of real experience. We wondered if we hadn't been mistaken, if the kinship we could feel more than describe was really there. All right. So looking at those two sentences, that word in context, what does shadowy mean? Shadowy primarily serves to suggest something. Gloomy, secret, sinister, concealed, or unsubstantiated. What do you think? Looks like we've got another chorus of E's. We got a D, a couple of D's. Looks like sort of going between E and D seem to be the two leading contenders, and A's out there too. So it looks like we can get rid of B and C, secret and sinister. That's good. Good that you were able to strike those immediately. And now that puts you in a good position. If you're able to remove two answers right off, then you're getting into the position where you're almost ready to make an educated guess or to take a shot at this question. Just a general overall strategy for the SAT as a whole. You typically, if you can only eliminate one answer choice, you really have to weigh whether you want to try answering that question. I would recommend against it. You typically, that's not good guessing. Is when you can, because you really only have a slim chance of getting that right. So, but if you can eliminate two, your chances improve. So we can get rid of B, we can get rid of C, and that leaves us with gloomy. All right. Now you think about it. Do you have gloomy imaginings? Now let's go back to that passage. Gloomy imaginings do not usually hold up in the light of real experience, right? So think about it. Were they really talking about their this is about their idea of Africa. And is it really gloomy? No, not really, right? We don't know that. That's a little too strong. So we could save it, but we're kind of weighing against it. Concealed. Uh, Now, concealed is, that could also be shadowy. This idea of that it's somewhere hidden, a little close to secret, right? And you were able to get rid of secret so quickly, so you might want to just, hold that one. But again, thinking about it in terms of the context as a whole, once you get to E, could be a little bit tough based on you might not be familiar with this word, particularly if you don't have a strong vocabulary, you may feel like, oh, unsubstantiated. I'm not quite sure what that means. You could try breaking the word apart. Un meaning not, and then substantial. You might see that word, so it's not substantial. Unsubstantiated here, right? It means that something that's unsubstantiated is something that hasn't been proven, right? It's something that it has not been, you're not sure if it's true or not. You're not sure if it's actually accurate. And that's really what this is getting about, right? That they've imagined all of these things, but they don't really know if they're real or not. So E is ultimately the best choice in this. Uh, Again, both of these, both A and D, they're close, but the key is we're not really you're not necessarily looking for, a possible right answer. You're looking for the best answer. And of all five choices, E is the best. Um, Hennessy, you said you looked at it. The word looked right. That could be a strategy. If again, I would say that if you were down to two choices, if you were in between D and E, you might want to say, okay, well, that word somehow you have that feeling. Sometimes that works. I wouldn't recommend it, right off the bat if you had all five answer choices, just to look at the word and not really know and just say it's got to be that one. But it could work in terms of making an educated guess. Sandra, you said, can we replace the options with the word to check? You could, yes, you definitely could. But it's important to read it. As long as you do that and you read it, not just the word in the sentence, but you read you fill in the word and then you read the sentence both before and after. So you read sort of three sentences rather than just that single sentence. That's fine. Are there any ways to improve vocab, like words that are really likely to be on the SAT? I have a sucky vocab. Yes, there are. And you can if you go to Testive, testive.com, Lucinda, we have Tom Rose actually has created, I believe it's about 80 vocab words that are the sort of some core words. Now, because they can't ask the same words over and over again, sorry, they can't come up with new words constantly, so they do tend to ask some of the same words over and over again. Go on to the website, look at some of the old study halls too, that we've covered vocab improvement. Coco, good point about D not making sense. The imaginings are not hidden. Do you recommend direct hits, toughest vocabulary? Yes, I think that's a good place to start. Definitely. You have the core, but should you also get this? I think so. I mean, it depends on how much time you have. That is very, that's a good practice set. If you're looking for strategies for each question type, go to testive.com resources. Next week, we're going to cover the rest of the remaining three question types. Uh, there was a question about what all six types are. Let me just go back to that quickly. There it is. Those are the six question types. Today we covered main idea, specific, and vocabulary. Next week, we'll be going through hide and seek, attitude, and technique type questions. Justin, what is a good reading SAT score? Well, that depends on, what, uh, what score you're aiming for, essentially. I mean, obviously, the higher the score, the more impressive it is to most schools that you're looking at. Um, Typically, the higher tier schools will be looking for something, uh, you know, in the high 600s to 700s. A solid score is certainly in the 500s to 600s are solid scores. Um, the difference, the difference between in those upper bands in the over 700, 720 to 800, the difference between getting a 750 and an 800 is one question, or two questions. So it's very difficult once you reach that level. So yeah, I don't know where you are, Justin, but you know if you're at that very kind of if you're at one end, that very high end, it's going to be very tough to improve. It's just very difficult. But moving, with study and practice, it's very very doable to move from, say, a 520 to a 610 or something like that. But the reading section is one of the toughest sections to make significant score improvements. Nope, thanks for those percentiles, Beta. Oh, great, Hennessy. See that? Went from a 520 to a 600. Could I go from a 680 to a 760 or 800? It's possible. Again, you're now in a band where it's very few questions you're talking about. Could you assign a general topic to work on to prepare for next week? I'm not really sure what you mean, Elizabeth. Do you mean a specific type of a question type for reading passages, or for the SAT overall? In terms of links for practicing reading passages, you know, I think the best place is the Blue Book, the SAT Blue Book. If you don't have that, you might want to invest in one that has real SAT questions. That's the only source. I mean, I'm reluctant to uh, recommend sites that create their own reading passages, because I don't really trust them. I think that the best place to go is where the College Board has actually published them. Oh, Elizabeth, sorry, a section in the Blue Book. Again, if you just go through the reading passages section, that might, kind of get you prepped for next week, where we're going to go over the remaining question types. That would probably be the best place. The Blue Book, uh, I'm not sure how much it costs. I think it's probably around $20. I know you can get it at Amazon. You can get it on any online bookstore, any large bookstore. I know. I'm not really sure where you are, but Barnes and Noble has it. There you go, Elizabeth. Thanks. Boy, you guys are quick tonight. $16 ships in 2 days. Look at that. Do I think Kaplan 12 practices? Yeah. Yep. That's another source. That's a fine source. So just want to get don't want to forget here that next week we've already covered that we're going to be uh, going through the last three question types. Additional practice, though, go on to testive.com. That we have unlimited free questions now, and if you so choose, you can get a subscription service to work one-on-one with a 99th percentile scoring coach. All of our coaches scored in the 99th percentile in both math and English, so they're a great resource for both answering the questions and for motivation. Um, Before I cut out, I want to acknowledge the Testive team. Miro Mirakaz Kazakov, Tom, the real Tom Rose, who you saw last week, Jackson Hava Noel, David Pikachu Chippendale, Lee the chemist Akamando, Shonak the closer Patel, David Chubby Shorts Haisang, Charles Kitten Smuggler Reese, Abby the Saint Engelstad, Will the Institute Eaton, Meg Smiles Butler. And again, every Monday. Next Monday will be at studyhall.testive.com. Sorry about the move. I just didn't want. I wanted to make sure that people I know were traveling yesterday in the United States and may not have had the opportunity to get online on time for this study hall. Before you all leave, if you wouldn't mind, I'm putting in a little, just a little survey that we have. If you can fill that out, that'd be great. If you have any comments or questions, I got another survey here too. I'll just keep those um, open for you. Do you have any tips to stay focused while reading a passage? Uh, you know, I think the best way, again, if you weren't here last week, Tom Rose gave us some great tips on trying to stay focused. One way to do that is to use your finger. I don't know if you've ever tried that, using your finger to scan while you read. Studies have proven that you actually do retain more and you do stay more focused when you use or follow your finger or a pencil tip. That often can really help with focusing and comprehension as well. Underlining, that's another method. Taking notes. Just trying to stay as engaged with the passage as possible. I don't know if you've ever heard the term active reading. I mean, the worst thing to do, or what we really don't recommend, is just sort of sitting there and just looking at it. I mean, your eyes will glaze over. Really try to be as active as possible. Really engage with the text itself. That means writing, scribbling, circling words you even don't know. You might think, well, why would I circle it? I don't know what it means. It just keeps you focused, and that's what you want to do. You want to sort of stay awake. It's a test of endurance in a lot of ways, and the reading more than anything else really is that. Is Princeton Review a good SAT scores? Yeah, also good. Again, a good reliable um, uh, source. All right, well, I thank you all for coming. A few more questions. I'm just gonna end these polls.